Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. For the first time since March, I'm actually sitting in the Design Crafts Council Ireland offices in the Castle Yard, and it's lovely to be with all of you today. I'm just going to allow a couple of minutes for you all to come on board, and I'm happy to see the numbers are getting very, very large. So I'm absolutely delighted that today's topic has attracted such a large group of people because it's extremely important. So we're going to look at product pricing and your business challenges. And today I have with us Bernie McCoy, who previously ran her own knitwear textile business and is now a senior lecturer with NCAD. And I have Tracy Gilbert of Tracy Gilbert Design. And Tracy's former life, I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, was as an actuary. And she was an actuary who always wanted to be a designer maker. So that story will be very interesting. And we have Donal Horgan with us, who is a chartered accountant, and he's going to answer any nitty-gritty questions that you have. I've had a couple of comments in the chat that I'm getting very echoey. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to change over to Bernie being the host immediately, and I'm going to mute myself. So welcome everybody, and please enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Emer, and I will kick off now by sharing my screen. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about, as Emer mentioned, I'm going to run through product with you today, and I've spoken a couple of other of the webinars, and this is sort of supports a lot of those other areas that I covered previously, and it might sort of start making a little bit more sense about your product and your product design. So when we think about product, sometimes we just think about the form maybe and the functionality, and we don't necessarily look at what's behind the product itself. So we think product is, yeah, is it useful? Does it do what it's supposed to do? But we don't look deeper than that. And there's an awful lot more within the process that we don't necessarily initially take into account. So I want to run through some of that. The three questions today that I want to cover is why you make, and how do you make, what's the process behind how you make, and obviously what you make, so the product that you actually make. So the first one I'm going to run through is why do you make in the first place? So we do it sort of because we do it innately sometimes, and we do it because that's what we do, we've always made. We don't question it. So I'd advise you to, really look deep at what drives you to make and what inspires you to make in the first place. And look at it, and I mean, I don't want you to overanalyze things, but you do need to be extremely aware of why and what drives you to make. And is it, so maybe it's to do with pleasure? Is it a need to have to make? Sometimes people just have to be doing something. It could be, as I say, for pleasure. It could be sort of a hobby that's turned into a business. So really ask why you're making. Is it to understand? But when I say understand, it could be to understand the making process, but it could be to understand what do objects do and why do we have them? And why do we have objects in the world anyway? And, if you're creating for an exhibition, understanding somebody's interaction with that product, is that why you do it? Do you want to understand why people love things, why people want things, why people enjoy interacting with what you make? Is that why you make? Are you looking for a validation for why you make? Am I good at this? Is it something that I do and I want the wider community to go, yeah, it's great, it's wonderful, you're brilliant at it. Is that why you make? Really dig deep. Why do I make things? Are you all about statements? Are you making something because you want to make a statement about a political issue, an environmental issue, around, could it be about sustainability? Why is there a statement that you're trying to make? you're trying to say when you make. And then, you know, maybe you're making for change. So you want to be the change maker within that field. You want to be a driver behind new concepts, new ideas around, maybe it is sustainability and global warming, and you want to figure out, you know, can I produce a product that might make people think twice about using it? So there's a whole host of reasons why you might make, and I think it's important to dig deep and to know why you make, and whatever the reason be, whether it's for pleasure, whether it's a need that you just have that you want to make, whether you are looking for that understanding of what product means, or any other area where you're trying to make a statement or change, they're all very valid. But unless you understand why you make, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to move your product into the next stage of development and the next stage of, or the next sort of, I suppose, specific area of the market that you're going for. And the reason why you make gives a little bit of authenticity. In fact, it gives a lot of authenticity around the products that you want, that you make anyway. So if you have this background and an understanding of your reason for making, you're not going to have a tendency to go and copy somebody else, or, you know, make something that's been made before. There's going to be a little bit of you in there. And if you can find that sort of little bit of you that creates an authenticity, it becomes a believable authenticity, or a believable product that it's part of you. So and it makes the end product really, really strong and individual. So it's a critical part of it. And I think most of us don't ask ourselves why we make and what the importance behind making gives to our business and gives to what we do. And it's incredibly important. And as I say, it adds a value and an ethos to what you do. So if you can value what the value you bring from the reason you make into your business, into your product, it informs your ethos, which will inform your brand, which will also then inform how people look at your business. So this is the starting point, which is the critical bit. So don't overlook it. Definitely take a step, take a breather, and have a go at figuring out why you make. So how you make, so what is the process behind the way you make? Again, I'm starting with the starting points and the influences, and that is also included a step on from the last slide. So it's what drives you to make. So again, look at the starting points. They're really important. What influences the way you make? Maybe it's a technique that you've discovered. Maybe you've been inspired by somebody else that makes beautiful things. Maybe it's a movement that's looking at a particular political or social issue that you're very, very passionate about. But the process is embedded in that, in terms of that it's your starting point. It's what drives it to the next stage. So it's part of your process of making. And it brings value to your business. So this is the value bit, you know, that you have your own ideas, your own response to a personal interest or personal desire to make and create. And then if you can convert that to value, that value then carries through into your business and becomes the individual value that you offer. Again, do you use sketches or do you design through making? And look at that, because either way, again, this brings the truth or the authenticity back into your business. So if you can use your sketches or your design through making to I suppose, promote or add value to your business by even having videos online about how you make, how you design, how you create, you engage with the consumer, and it adds that authenticity and that really interesting journey behind how a piece of your work starts from the inspirational element right through to it starting to be made, and the process that you use. And whatever that process is, it will be true to you. But know what it is, and look at what it is and see where are there value points within it that you can extract to make your business stronger, believable and authentic. Again, it still all goes back to your value, your ethos, and your product sits within that. The process that we use generally, people have tried to map it over the years in terms of how you might create. the first bit would be that you connect with something. So you empathize, or you have a desire, or you have an interest in an area. So you look at that and research it. You need to then frame it as in, what is the start of my story? What is it I'm trying to do? You'll do a whole load of ideas, be they sketches or little prototypes or making small mock-ups, whatever process you use. And then you'll get a minimum viable product, which is a product that you could test on your potential customer. You get feedback, and then you work on that feedback. So when we're looking at why we create, how we create, and what we create or make, this is where it sits within that process. So identifying why you do something is really important. The way you do it and how you create something, knowing how you do that's really important. And then what you end up with is really, again, another element and then at the end of that, you're hopping between these things, because nothing is ever a straight line and nothing works first time, and you're testing and you're testing and you're coming back again. So know how you go through this path of developing an idea or a product. And each bit of it, you will jump about. So nobody goes in a straight line. So jump through that process. Then what you make, so the product that you end up making has to fit with whoever you've decided it's for. So what customer is this product being made for? And do you know who they are and what they want and what they do? So personas, if you're aware of them, they're quite a good way of trying to discover this and to see, will your idea that you've come up with, that concept, will it fit within that marketplace or within a person's need for something? And you can do an empathy map, which some of you may well have come from or across before, where you ask questions like, when I make a product, what does it make that person think and feel about it? You know, because if you're trying to change, say you're making because you want to evoke change, then you want to make sure that that change is at the core of how they feel about your product. If you're making because you want to make a statement about something, if they don't see that statement straight away from the product and what you're doing, then there may be something a little bit missing somewhere. So it's a good exercise to do, to sort of ask yourself what a person would say, feel, think, do, what they like, what they dislike about what I make, and sort of look at that when you're in your product development stage. Does your product actually fit your persona and the needs and their expectations? And I'll put this in because it's a model for product development whereby you can see, if you produce a sort of a good product that fits, that offers everything that the person needs, they'll be happy enough with it. But if you can offer something that's an added, a hidden extra, or a hidden need that they're not expecting, it moves right up into that upper area of this, the diagram, and it means that they go way happier. So always over deliver, always add something in there into the product that they're not expecting, but actually gives them something else. And you'll find that they will actually, you'll end up with a really good customer base that's happy. What you make, again, if you're making ranges and collections of things, to be cohesive. You may well have a load of different elements as part of your collections or your work or your products, but if you have too many of them, the customer gets really confused, and you're probably not doing justice to a concept or an idea or a statement that you want to make, or the ethos of the meaning behind what you do is going to be lost and just all over the place. Some of the tips around that would be to use names or themes around each range that you do, or each group of items that you make or product that you make. But make sure that when you do name something, that it evokes the business brand value or the message or that statement or that initial concept that you had that you wanted to push through with the product. So just make sure it supports that. And it creates a perception. So again, the empathy map, go back and see, well, what do people really think about what I'm doing? Are they getting the message? Do they understand why I'm making this piece? Is it doing what I want it to do? And don't pick random names that don't really link to anything, that are completely just, you know, might sound nice, but they don't really do anything. Your collections or your ranges of product could be defined by their color, their shape, their form, their size, their texture. If you're really stuck trying to group things, you may well go and use these sort of very basic, simple ways of grouping product. It can be grouped, as I say, in messaging or in concept and around what you want to say. So don't present or don't bring out a range online or any other way that doesn't hold together in a kind of a cohesive way that gives the same messaging. So no loads of bits of things. The quality of the product that you produce needs to be at the right level. So no matter what you produce, bring the quality right through at whatever level that might be. So if it's really high end, everything from the material to how you've made it, the finish of it, the packaging, even the engagement with the customer has to be at that high quality level. If it's a sort of a lower end level, then you'll have to pitch that at that level as well. But the delivery, if you promise something, you still over deliver. You still need to kind of have that the customer's going away really, really happy. Again, how you're seen and how you want to be seen, and the product is part and sits in the middle of that. So when you're designing your product, it sits within the middle of what your business is actually about. And we go back to your product fit again. Whether it's commissioning, limited editions, batch or outsource, again, it's the consistency and the brand identity is continuously in there. Don't forget that. Everything you do is sitting around your product, around your identity and around what you're doing. So don't mix message at that point. When you have your minimum viable product prototype, which is what's usually called an MVP, once you have a product that you can test it. Don't wait, okay? Because you may well put out to the market something that's you think is brilliant and wonderful, and the next thing somebody comes along and goes, oh yeah, but the spout is upside down, or it doesn't work, or it doesn't, not functioning correctly. You just want to test it initially to see, do I need to change anything before you really launch it out there? When you're testing, don't say anything to somebody, just give them the piece and see what they do. And it's a really interesting exercise because it sees how people interact with what you make. And if you say nothing, they will do things that you are not expecting them to do with it. And they'll try things with it and they'll look at it differently. They'll open it in a certain way. They'll, maybe make comments as they do it. And you get a huge amount of feedback from that. So listen, don't say anything, don't tell them. And then whatever you do, act on it, because there's no point in finding out this information and not acting on it. I showed the slide the last time, but I wanted to put it in here again because we do sit in that space of innovators, early adopters, more than likely. And it's a tough bit to be in when you're creating product because you're constantly doing new things and you're constantly trying to get out there with them. If you're content in that space, recognize it, because you need to be aware that you're going to spend, as I said, an awful lot of time on product development and R&D, research and development, and those concepts and those ideas. And they take time and they take energy and they take, I suppose, resources from the business to stay in that space. So make sure you can command a price, and I know the others are going to talk about pricing shortly, but make sure that you are commanding what you need to allow you to stay in that space. And if you don't want to stay in that space and you're trying to jump into the main market stream, brilliant. But make sure, again, I said it before, get supports for that. But you need to recognize where you're sitting, where you want to go, and how you're going to get there. And then the design process and the product is in the middle of what you do. That is what you do. That's what you're about. But you have to keep that thing going continuously through all of what I spoke about. Then all on the outside, you're doing it as well because you're self-employed. You're the only business owner. You're doing your marketing. You're doing your design. You design things. You're manufacturing. You're doing everything else. But at the core of it, who you are is more than likely your design process, your making, and what you do. So why do you make, how do you make, what do you make are three key areas that you really need to look at. The why do you make will define your authenticity. It will say that you're an authentic business. The how you make will allow people to see your process, and you can use that process to promote the business. And what you make, just make sure it fits with what you're saying, what you're doing, and what you're trying to achieve. And I hope that's helped in some way to allow you to sort of focus when you're producing a new product range. Thank you. Right, stop. Yeah, and if we, Tracy, are you able to hop in?
Yeah, no problem at all. I'll just load up the, you see the, here we go. Now, so my name is Tracy Gilbert. I'm an actuary by profession, so I would have been involved in pricing complex risks in a previous life, but like many of you here, absolutely love making and have been just really enjoying owning my own business and producing my own pieces. But what I have noticed an awful lot over my last few years working in craft and design is that I often hear, you know, I'm really, really strong creatively. I'm just no good at numbers. And the reality is that as a craft business, you actually need to be good at everything. So you can't set aside the numbers, you can't set aside social media. There's many things you can't set aside. So the first thing I'd like to say is you're not just a designer and maker. In fact, you're an IT guru. This time you're going to pick up your camera and become a photographer. You're a social media expert. You're a PR expert. You're a firefighter. You're dealing with issues, live issues from retailers and customers. But you also need to be a pricing genius, okay? So the end result of all this is, right, as a designer maker, you're actually a multitasking genius, all right? So the idea is that you embrace pricing and you get comfortable with the numbers, and it's not something you're afraid of talking about and afraid of discussing. It's an integral part of your business. So the idea today is that I'm going to go through some of the basics. I'm not entirely sure I'm going to pitch it at the right level for everybody on the call, but I'm more than happy to go through any questions that you have. So we'll start off with some of the basics. And the first thing to note is that pricing is a balancing act, okay? If you start off pricing your products too low, you're going to end up being incredibly busy. So you might be a candle maker down in Wexford, producing marvellous candles, and you're selling them for €1, and word gets out, my God, she's a lovely girl down in Wexford, and she's selling her candles for €1, and they're handmade and they're fantastic. Wonderful that you're going to be busy, but my God, you're going to be crazy. And are you going to be making enough money to actually make ends meet? So you need to be really careful in how you price your time and your products in order to get the balance right. On the other hand, if you turn around and say, my candle is the most amazing candle ever and it's €100 and every other candle on the market is €10, it may be that you're uncompetitive. Now, a lot of this will go with what Bernie has said, in that you need to figure out why you're producing and what your authentic needs are, what your message is, and that will also impact your price. But the first thing to say is you need to be somewhere in the middle. So you want to be competitive, but you also don't want to be too busy that you can't actually have any other time for anything else. So the first thing to do when you're pricing is you need to know your costs. And I don't mean just vaguely have an idea of your cost. I mean, you need to know every single cost associated with every single product and every commission that you do. And you may hate spreadsheets and you may like writing things down on lists, but that needs to stop. You need to open Excel or Google Sheets and you need to make friends with it. And you need to take the time to understand that something robust for pricing is needed, and you can go back to it time and time again and know how you price something before and how you can change it going forward. So what I would recommend that you all do is you have a column for every product. You list every single thing that's required in that spreadsheet. You code. So if you're using, I'm a jeweler, so if I'm using an emerald and I tend to get it from a supplier in Ireland, I'll list the supplier, I'll list the product code of the emerald that I've used, I have a price, and that way when I go back and, you know, Susan has been delighted with her ring, but Mary wants one too, I have a starting point for what I've priced, and I don't have to go, Jesus, what did I tell Mary now, and is it consistent with what I'm going to tell Susan, okay? So the idea of pricing robustly is that you have an audit trail, you have documentation on what you're pricing and what led you to the decision on coming up with the price. So not your costs are absolutely key. Okay. Now this is getting a little bit technical. There's two types of costs. You've got direct costs and you've also got indirect costs. Direct costs is something that is a part of the process to make that particular piece. So if you're making a piece of pottery, it's the amount of clay that's used in that piece. If it's knitwear, the amount of yarn that was used. Indirect is a little bit harder to allow for in pricing. And the idea is that you're covering your overheads, such as whether it's rent in the studio, whether it's your electricity, commercial rates, they all need to be accounted for in your pricing. So you can't just say, I'm knitting this jumper, the yarn is, €20, therefore I'm going to charge blah based on that. You need to be aware that you're using electricity, the cost of running the studio, and you need to make sure that the direct and the indirect costs are being allowed for somehow. So at the end of the day, the electricity bill of 2,500 or whatever it might be will need to be paid at the end of the year or throughout the year. So for a really simple example would be, if there's 2,500 in costs and you intend to sell 1,000 pieces, you allow 250 in the cost of each of those products to ensure that you're going to be able to pay that bill at the end of the year, okay? So both types of costs need to be accounted for. One cost that I find isn't really dealt with very well as a craftsperson is the cost of your time. Okay, so it needs to be included, and you need to make sure that you're getting it right. Sorry about that, I'm just moving this away so I can see. You need to work out how long it takes on average to create each product from start to finish. And what I'll say to you is you need to be incredibly realistic. So for example, just because you think you're going to speed up if you've got a few orders in isn't necessarily the case. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. That's why I say on average. But assuming that something takes too little time will result in you actually putting in too low a price. And again, you come back to perhaps being a busy fool in that you've got a heap of orders and not enough time to get them done, which leads to pressure, which leads to disappointment from a customer when you let them down. So the important thing to remember is your time is really important to cost when you're working on a commission or when you're coming up with a product range that you're going to roll out to retailers. And it's as simple as multiplying the amount of time that it takes for you to make that product from start to end by what you deem to be your hourly rate. So it might be that as a goldsmith, you think it's €50 an hour is your cost if you were to work in a workshop, but you're working for yourself. It takes you an hour to make this particular product, and therefore €50 should be allocated to the costing of this particular piece. Okay, so that's how it works, but it's important to get that right. Another one of the terms that come up quite a bit is the profit margin. It's the percentage of profit that you'd like to make on each product and on each commission. It can change by product if you wish it to, but overall in your head you should have an idea of the amount of profit that you would like to make. It's a subjective assumption. What I mean by that is it's going to change company to company, individual to individual, and it is what's deemed almost the top secret part of pricing in the industry. So you can't ring up a competitor and say, oh, by the way, what's your profit margin? It's entirely up to yourself to figure out what that should be and how you should set it and what needs to be taken account into setting that margin. So one rule of thumb is that for highly competitive industries, you tend to have a lower profit margin. So for things that are all the same, like if you're going into Woodies and you're going to buy a screw, all screws are pretty much going to be around the same price, and you would expect that the margin on producing screws is going to be pretty low. But then when you move into crafts pieces and luxury branded products, you do expect the profit margin to be higher. And you know, if you think of a handbag that's handmade and got a good brand, you probably know that a good brand will carry a higher profit margin than something that's mass produced. It's also a little confusing in that sometimes the profit margin can be used to allow for your indirect expenses. So in the example I gave you previously, I mentioned that you could allow for your electricity bill and your rent and stuff, but you may have no idea as to how many products you're going to sell. but you might increase your profit margin to allow for the fact that you'd like some money that you're getting in going towards those particular bills. And then we move on to different types of prices, and I'm aware that some people will be wholesaling products while others are only doing commissions. So I'll try when working through this just to make sure that I'm covering both. But again, if you have any specific questions, let me know. So the wholesale price is exactly what it says in the tin. It's essentially the price you quote at a retailer when you're at a trade show. So when you rock up to show to showcase in January, you tend to know your prices and you discuss them with the retailers. Then you have your manufacturer's suggested retail price, or your MSRP, and this is simply the wholesale price multiplied by the standard retail markup. Now, it differs from industry to industry, and it should be researched, but it's not something onerous to research. So in jewellery, you're talking about a markup of 2.5 to 2.7. And if you're in a place at the moment where you're setting prices and you really don't have a clue what it is, I suggest talking to a local retailer who will tell you what the markup tends to be. And I'm sure there's other people in the crafts industry more than happy to give you a hand along the way. The other thing that comes into pricing is VAT, so value added tax. You'll be aware that depending on your level of revenue, you may be required to be VAT registered. You might decide at the start to be VAT registered before you even get to those limits for a different load of different reasons. But if you're VAT registered, you can claim VAT back on purchases and costs from revenue. So it's one of the advantages. And the retailers also charge the VAT back and claim the VAT back from revenue. So prices you'll see can be expressed with or without VAT. So you'll see 20 ex VAT or 24.6 inclusive of the 23% VAT. So just again, get comfortable with ex VAT, including VAT, and what it means and how it's calculated. Generally, when you're talking about the wholesale price, you're talking about the total amount of costs per product. So if I'm producing a ring, I'll have a list of all of the costs associated with producing that ring, including the amount of time it's taken me to do it. And essentially you add those all up and you multiply them by 1 plus your profit margin, which I've discussed previously. If you charge VAT, you add all those up above and you multiply by 1 plus the VAT rate, which is 1.23%. So that's how it works. And normally when you've got a wholesale price, you normally say to the retailer, this is a wholesale price, it's ex VAT, because generally retailers are VAT registered. If you've no interest whatsoever in ever going into retail and wholesale price isn't something you're interested in, the method above is exactly the same if you're just going to charge directly to consumers. So there's nothing different there. It's still a matter of knowing all your costs and multiplying it by 1 plus your profit margin. So I've given an example, and again, I normally don't put too many words on a slide, but I thought it might be of interest to someone to have a working example. So I'll give an example of a candle maker, and their revenue is over 70 grand a year, so they're VAT registered. The desired profit margin on retail pricing is 50%. And the caveat on the 50% is I've put a finger in the air and I've guessed. This isn't something that you take from this presentation and think, well, that should be my profit margin because Tracy said. So you need to put some time into figuring out your profit margin. But what it does mean is for every tenner of costs that I have in my candle making business or for that product, I expect to make a £5 in profit, okay? So a vanilla scented candle costs me a total of a tenner, excluding that to make, so that's all my costs in there. All right, so essentially to work out what my wholesale price will be, I'm using the same formula as in the previous slide. So it's your cost price multiplied by 1 plus your profit margin, and that's your ex VAT rate. So it's a tenner times 1 plus your 50%, which is your profit margin. So essentially the number that you're communicating to retailers for their product is it's €15 ex VAT. Okay, I'm going to assume that the industry markup is 2.5 times, which it is in jewellery. For a lot of people, it can go up as high as 2.93, but in general, it's about 2.5. So what that tells me is that if I multiply the wholesale rate or the wholesale price and I multiply by that retail markup, I'll get the manufacturer's suggested retail price. And this is essentially the price that you put on your website and you deal with the customers. So you'll actually make more profit on something that's sold directly through your website than if it came through a retailer. But generally you keep those two prices the same, so that the price of the retailer and the price on your website are the same. It's worth saying that there's no hard or fast rules on pricing. Assumptions differ by industry, but it's important to look at what your competitors are doing, and ring other people up and retailers up to understand the different numbers involved, or to get a handle on what the retail markup might be. But there's no right answer, and someone sitting here going, well, that's not how I price. It actually doesn't matter, so long as you know that you're making money and that you're making enough money. So I'm not here to judge your pricing, but it's more just to get an understanding of where you stand. And you know that when you get an order in of 100 things, that firstly, you can do them, and secondly, you're actually going to make decent money producing them too, that you're not going to go into a massive spin of, I'm losing money on that piece, and why the hell did I get this order? So that's why it's important to get your pricing right. So just some things to consider when setting pricing and having an understanding of pricing is that it's key to the success and survival of every enterprise. Every single company, whether you're making one-offs, whether you're mass producing, if you get the price wrong, you're snookered. And if you get it nice and you're making money, happy days. It allows you to go through what Bernie was talking about, and create new products and all the rest of it. So get comfortable with it, discuss it. Really, really important for commission work. I know a lot of people are like, I didn't really talk to them about price, but God, it sounds great, can't wait, I'm really excited. But it's really, really important that you set expectations on what the price of that product is likely to be. And you also would need to understand the impact of offering discounts. So I think as craftspeople, we're quite eager to make the sale. We love when things sell. We do the happy dance, as everyone talks about, but it's incredibly important that if we need to give a discount, whether it's to a retailer or whether it's on a commission price or there's a bit of haggling going on, that you understand the impact it has on your profit margin and on your business. And that you understand that at times there's a price at which you just can't go below, and you just say no. You say, I'm really sorry, I'd love to be in your shop, but it's just, I'm going to start hemorrhaging. I'm going to lose, I'm going to start bleeding here. This just doesn't make sense, okay? So just get comfortable that you're making enough money, and be strong in discussing your prices, and don't be apologetic about them, which I tend to see quite a lot. Pricing, you don't do it once and go, nice, how many prices are done. I'm afraid it's a continual process. It's very like, again, what Bernie was showing in the product development process. It needs to be reviewed regularly for wholesale and non-wholesale. You're not going to upset retailers by changing your prices once a year, once every 2 years, okay? If you change them every single time with a standard product, you may vex them. It's important to have consistency in your pricing, and that's why if you have a robust process, it makes sense that you won't need to change your pricing very often, because you know what's in there is pretty good. But you do need to review them at least once a year, or following a shift in the market. So as a jeweler at the moment, gold is through the roof. It's continually increasing, and essentially the prices I gave last year, I can't stand over them, not a chance. So prices need to reflect that. In fact, with gold prices the way they are, I would price on a particular every single day, given the way it's changing at the moment. We're in the world of COVID-19. It may be that it's changed your processes. It may be that you now need to post a lot more than you normally would. It may be that there's changes to how you're making, okay? It's important to understand the financial consequence of that. You need to think about what that financial consequence is. Are you happy to take whatever additional cost or discount you might be seeing on the chin? Are you happy with that, or do you want to pass it on? But you need to look at it in the context of COVID-19. I know everyone's trying to be very competitive, but you also want to continue to survive as a business through this tough time. Other things to consider for those doing commission work and bespoke. As I said, price expectations at the beginning of the process. Be as realistic as you can about the time it would take you to design and to make the piece. So there's two separate things there. Ensure the cost of time is included in your cost when setting the price. And remember that the cost of delivery and packaging is on top of it, or have you already included that in your conversation with the the client. So it's often the case where you go, oh yeah, I can do it for 500, and then you realize it's going to be €30 to deliver it, and you actually haven't said that, and you're going to take the €30 hit. So just remember that delivery and packaging needs to be included as well. Just a reminder again that on bespoke work, there's a formula in terms of working out your price, and I should say overall price actually, sorry. The next thing I'll say, and I'm wrapping up here, is the more you stand out from the crowd and the more you dare to offer something unique and special, the more you've room to move your pricing. So for example, if you're just creating something that's the same as everybody else, you kind of, the race to the bottom begins. So for example, you know, a sliced pan of bread, you know, you can't sell the same bread for £5 when it's 39 cents in Tesco. But if you're creating something different, something unique, something special, authentic, something that really adds value to the customer, remember that you don't need to be in the race to the bottom, and pricing isn't quite as sensitive as it is for commodity type products. And that pretty much covers everything I had to say on pricing. I hope it was helpful, and I'm here for the Q&A at the end if there's anything that I can help you with. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tracy. We do have a question, but maybe we'll wait till near the end to go into that. Donal, you're great, you're on top of things. You're going to kick off now in a few minutes. So we'll answer some of any questions that you have at the end of the session. So please keep typing them in. We have them all here listed, so we won't forget about you. And Donal, thanks a million.
Okay, so I hope you can all hear me. Yeah, and you can see the slides up there.
Yep, you're good.
Well, hopefully we'll be fairly quick. I've only 4 slides, I think it is. The first 3 on product and pricing, and it's very generic stuff. And again, it's not coming from a crafts parent by any means. I'm a boring accountant, I'm afraid. So this is very theoretical, but hopefully it'll be consistent with what both Bernie and Tracy have said. And the first thing I'd start by saying is that most products will go through a life cycle of fairly similar stages. The introduction, the growth, the maturity, and the either decline or renewal. And when we come to look at pricing, it is probably important where along the life cycle of your product when determining what your price strategy might be, because the factors are so different. So the product introduction is generally your prototype or your first introduction into the market, and your product will hopefully improve and change and morph into something different as time goes on. But that original product will go through the 4 stages, and it will hopefully give birth to further products that will come along to supplement your product range. So the next thing to look at, again with product and pricing, is what the marketing people might call the 4 P's of marketing. And this would be what the marketing people would, I suppose, refer to as how we should think of our business and our product over these 4 P's, which is the product, the price, the place, and the promotion. And again, all that stuff is pretty self-explanatory, I think. How your product sits in its life cycle will determine how it is promoted and how the price is set. But there are 5 then basic strategies that you might think of when considering pricing. And the first one there, as Tracy had made out, the cost plus is a very important one. And knowing what your costs are and deriving your selling price based on what the cost price is, or a cost plus model, which is the first one. Again, to do this properly, you have to be absolutely sure of what your input costs are. And if you get it wrong, then your cost plus model won't necessarily work. But similarly, I think Tracy touched on this as well, your competitive pricing is that you're going to set your pricing based on what your competition are doing. Again, I suppose this won't work if it's set very low and your costs are too high. So maybe it'll force you to look at your production or your design, and it might force you into altering your product to ensure you've got a product that can be competitively priced. Value-based pricing then is, I suppose this is more, I suppose, you're selling value or perceptions of value, and you're trying to figure out what your customer believes is the worth in your product. And I suppose all of us should be trying to maximize our own worth. And again, I don't know which of the girls refer to it. We got to make sure we value ourselves and our time and our own input into our business, because nobody else will if we don't. The fourth pricing strategy is what we call price skimming. And this is where I suppose we might set a high price in the early days. And as you get market penetration and as products start to move, you might start lowering your price to kind of facilitate increased numbers of sales. And the opposite to that is penetration pricing, which is you start low and you hope when you get established in the market, then your price will slowly come up. And you know, any pricing strategy, I suppose, you gotta view the number of products that you sell multiplied by the price. Because it's all great if you can get a fantastic price but only sell one unit. And equally, there's no good selling 100,000 products if the unit selling price isn't good enough. So it's a mixture of both, and trying to get the optimum will take probably trial and error, and it will probably take you your lifetime to get it right, because it's never right. It's always something that needs work. But your product and where you sit in the life cycle of that product, and your price and your pricing strategy are something that you have to, I suppose, sit down and look in the mirror and try and figure out what is best for you and for your business. And I suppose that's all I'm going to say on product and pricing. And I'd like to move on and then look at the kind of business challenges that I think that are coming down the tracks at all of us over the next maybe 12 months. And I don't think these are going to come as a surprise to anybody. These are the big ticket items that are coming down to every business in every walk of life, whether you're in an employment or not working or running your own business, or no matter what we're looking at. COVID-19 has upset us greatly, and we're here in County Laois where we're under lockdown. So it's impacted on us over the last few days more than most. And COVID-19 will have, I suppose, unforeseen. Even now, we kind of think ourselves as being reasonably expert and up to date on this pandemic, but we really don't know where things are going to be in the next 3 months, never mind 6 or 9 months ahead. So we're just going to have to roll with the punches, and we're just going to have to recognize it as a problem and try and stay on our feet and try and be ready to exploit whatever opportunities might come our way. But we can't afford to stick our head in the sand, I suppose, for all of these negative things that might be coming at us. We've got to recognize them as potential problems, and again, I suppose, do what the Americans might do, which is try and view them as opportunities rather than challenges. Brexit, then, we'll all have been sick of hearing about Brexit up to about 6 months ago, when, because of the pandemic, it fell off the cliff, and Brexit doesn't seem to be a problem right now, but it is, and it's coming very fast down the tracks at it. The actual legal position is that the Great Britain have left the European Union, and there is a transitional arrangement that we are currently going through, and that transitional arrangement comes to pass on the 31st of December. So within less than 5 months, the British are gone. They're gone out of the EU, and there is no agreement in place currently to replace the current status quo. We're pretty sure that the negotiations between the European authorities and the British authorities are not going well. So the hard Brexit you might have heard about some months ago is looking more and more likely. And that leads us on to the next one, that there is possibly, and I think when we hear the word recession, oftentimes recession has awful negative connotations. In economic theory, a recession is defined as 2 quarters where there is negative growth. So Q1 being January, February, March, and Q2, April, May, June, and the pandemic hit in March. So I'm not sure if we're technically in a recession right now, but certainly once we get to the end of September, we will be in a recession, because we will have seen 2 negative quarters, being Q2 and Q3. And all of these factors are beginning to generate a very negative sentiment around everybody, and everybody is worried, and worry can be a great hindrance on business. And You know, people aren't going to spend money maybe because they're holding on to wait to see what happens next week and next month, and it can prevent spending, and spending prevents sales, and sales prevents business. So we get into a spiral of negative thinking, which is difficult to sidestep. But we have to try. We have to try and put the negatives to one side and look for the opportunities that are there and try and exploit those opportunities as best we can. Aside from those few negatives, I suppose the ones that have been with us for a long time and haven't shown any sign of improvement has been our insurance situation. That has been, you know, it's been causing all sorts of problems in all sorts of industries, and we don't seem any closer to coming to a solution. I mean, any of us that are in the retail sector, we can see our insurance premium going up year on year. The personal injury claims seem to have gone through the roof. There seems to be no limit on what a judge might give out for someone with a sore finger. I mean, it seems incredible sometimes. Our own high streets are seeing awful problems and pressures. The Lidls and Aldis and the supermarkets been set up outside and on the corners of towns have taken an awful lot of the lifeblood out of our high street and main streets, and that has had an impact on footfall and so on. So, you know, these things aren't going to change overnight, and they're things we got to recognise, and we got to recognise them and look for the opportunities. And if that's offline or rather online, then that's what we got to do. And we got to, again, not stick our head in the sand, and we got to be ready to face these challenges head on. Again, some of the stuff I suppose that is less within our control is the national tax policy. And again, we're in a great unknown, because whilst for the last 3 months, the government have appeared to be, I suppose, trying to facilitate and trying to facilitate COVID-19 payments and business supports, I suppose the bank of money that's available to government is going to dry up fairly suddenly. So our tax regime, we just don't know where it's going to go. There's talk at the moment of being helpful, making some concessions to the entertainment industry, for example, with respect to VAT rates, but we just don't know where things are going to go and what the economic policy might be for governments in 1 year and 2 years and 3 years ahead. So again, they're just a challenge we're all going to have to face. And then lastly, I think sometimes the last little point on the slide is that sometimes we can get wrapped up in our business life to the detriment of our personal life, and trying to find that happy medium can be very difficult sometimes between, you know, your personal relationships and family and so on, and business life, and it's important to give time to both, and sometimes to switch off from business life. And I know I spoke on a previous webinar about, you know, when you are the main person in the business, and every time you walk out the front door, you're representing your business, and you need to put the best foot forward and so on. But you also have a personal life, and you need to be able to shut off. And again, I would urge you all to try and find that fine line or that balance between both, because it's all a balance, and none of us will ever get it right. All we can do is try. And I suppose the last thing I'll say is try not to get caught up in the negative, because it is probably going to become more and more a negative environment from lots of different perspectives. But just let's face it, and don't be sticking our heads in the sand and thinking it will go away. But let's rise up to it and take it on. And that's my advice for what it's worth. So thank you all for listening. And short but sweet, that's all from me.
Donald, thanks very much. That's great. If there's anybody who wants to ask questions, please do pop it in on the chat little symbol down below. Now, we did have one on VAT from Sarah. Do you recommend registering for VAT even if below the limit? Tracy, would you have any thoughts on that?
There's advantages and disadvantages to being registered for VAT before you hit the limits. I can't recommend what you should do. I can tell you what I did and the reasons I did it, and I can list some of the advantages and disadvantages, and you can essentially make up your own mind. But firstly, in terms of VAT, you need to look at what it is you're trying to do. Are you interested in wholesaling products, or are you looking to purely work on bespoke pieces for people? So the first thing to say is, if you're looking at retail, the retailer is going to be charging VAT anyway, okay? So you being registered for VAT, it means that you get the VAT back on purchases. So for example, if your packaging is £6, you know, and then at the ex-VAT price, you end up being, you pay €6 times 1.23 in total, but you get 23% back on that purchase. So overall, it actually reduces your costs down if you are VAT registered, which is certainly an advantage. But it means that when you are pricing, your overall price then needs, so when you take your costs into account, your profit margin into account, you then need to add them all together, and then you need to increase the amount by 23%. So if you're just doing bespoke work, you are then increasing your prices by 23% to the consumer. So it doesn't make you as competitive as if you were not VAT registered. So you really need to think about what you're trying to do. And the other thing is that if you decide not to be VAT registered and you're moseying along, if your ambition is over 70,000 a year, and it should be, everybody should be aiming to get more than 70 grand a year, you absolutely are going to need to increase your prices when you reach that limit. So what you're going to have is, you're going to maybe have a jump in price, and you need to set expectations around that at the point that those prices are going to increase. So what did I do? I decided to be VAT registered from the very beginning. Why? One, I was going to blast at 70 grand, right? And every craftsperson out there can, so you need to believe you can, and you need to aim. Second reason is that I was essentially setting up a new business from scratch. I had a lot of machinery to buy. I loved tools, nearly more than I loved making, which was to my detriment. And we're all the same, but you get the VAT back on those big purchases, okay? But what I will say about VAT is that it is an administrative process. It's a legal requirement to put in your VAT returns. You might want to talk to someone like Donal about actually putting in the VAT returns on your behalf. It's not a hard process, but it's a process that needs to be done. And it's a little bit tricky to keep on top of everything. There's VAT deadlines, and you really need to make sure that you get it in on time. Best will in the world, I said to myself, I'm not going to leave it to the night before it's due. Listen, I left it without fail. I still leave it to the night before it's due, and there's sweats and there's crying, and why did I leave it to the last minute? So you need to think about it in that context. But essentially, if you're interested in going into retail, and that's really where you're aiming, there's advantages. But again, I can't recommend for any specific business without knowing the details.
Thanks, Tracy. Donal, is there, you know, if you were exporting, is there anything where you'd recommend VAT or no VAT at that point?
Well, if you're exporting, if you're not VAT registered, it doesn't really make much difference. It does on the import side, however. If you're importing out of the UK, for example, and though the UK mightn't be a great example because they're leaving the EU, but if you're importing from the EU, if you are VAT registered, you will import at 0% VAT. But if you are not VAT registered, you will be charged the VAT of the local country. So in the UK, for example, there's a 19% VAT rate. So if you import out of the UK, you will pay an extra 19% if you are not VAT registered.
Yeah.
As regards the export, no, the export should be fine, because if you're not charging VAT in the first instance, not being VAT registered, it will make no difference. If you are VAT registered, and again, your customer in the end country is not VAT registered in their country, they will suffer Irish VAT. But if they are VAT registered, it will be a 0% export.
Yeah.
So it's
yeah. Well, just from my own point of view, Tracy's right at the beginning. If you're buying a whole load of equipment, and I think, Donal, you referred to this in the previous webinar as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can gain something if you're VAT registered.
Yeah.
But I know there's an awful lot of people that maybe are producing one-off pieces, or they're direct selling to consumers, and it high margin onto their work if they don't need to. So I think you're right in a sense that if you have a pricing strategy early on that allows for you to go over into that 70,000 bracket, that you allow for that in your pricing strategy early. You don't necessarily have to register for VAT early if it doesn't benefit you?
Well, so long as you're under the legal thresholds,
Yeah.
you're not obliged to register for VAT. It's a choice. You know, but once you surpass the legal thresholds, then it's a legal obligation and you must do it. So it depends where you are. But I would agree with Tracy that, you know, we should strive for these figures. We should strive to be aiming that we have to register for VAT, because it's not a charity we're running a business, and you know, if you're making only 70 grand, by the time you pay your suppliers out of it, you know, there'll be a whole lot left. And the last thing is, don't be embarrassed or ashamed to be expensive. In fact, I would highly recommend that you should be expensive, and maybe not exorbitantly expensive, but you certainly shouldn't be cheap. You know, there's no one will thank you if you sell a product under price. You know, be nice and expensive is probably the wrong word, but don't be cheap.
Yeah.
You know, and don't be afraid of charging a premium price for your product, especially in the design and craft space, because it's a bit of you that you're selling. It's not like, I mean, accountants are fairly generic. You know, there's ones that are better than others, but I mean, we all do more or less the same thing. I mean, you don't have a fantastic design accountant. You know, so our pricing, it tends to be generic enough, but you guys are completely different. You're selling a bit of your soul, so to speak. So, you know, value it and price it, and if you've got to add a couple of percentages for VAT, so be it. The customer will be very happy to pay it.
And the other thing to say is that you should really box clever. So, for example, I know no matter what I do, I can't be competitive when it comes to claddagh rings. It's just not doable. And the expectation in the market out there is that a claddagh ring will cost you something like a tenner, like, or 15 quid. They have no understanding of the fact that something might be handmade. And so there's certain people that understand it and are happy. But if you're going to offer something in that in a claddagh kind of way, try to do something different so that it does stand out. And that was the point at the end, was by standing out and offering something different, you're not getting dragged into that race to the bottom. And I think in COVID-19 and what we're seeing at the moment, you'll see prices been slashed, sales all over the place. Like, I'm pretty much, as a consumer, I'm kind of exhausted by the amount of Facebook ads I'm seeing, even in my feed and in the Instagram feed. So, you know, don't feel that you have to drop your prices in order to get people in. And, you know, sometimes, you know, doing more on Instagram and showing them the processes and, you know, do time-lapse videos of how something is made adds that value and gives people an understanding that I'd love to give you 40% off, but I can't, you know, and that's totally acceptable as well.
No, that's just with the product at the beginning, what I was saying about something, because that's the story behind it, and that's the value, and that's what you're selling. We've a good few other questions here, so if we can get. Sue asked, can you do VAT returns yourself, or do you have to have an accountant, Donald?
Oh no, absolutely, you can do them yourself. Yeah, all taxes are done under the self-assessment system, so it's everyone is entitled to do their own. Yes, there's no need for any external. No.
Okay, and we have another one here from Orla. Is it okay for prices on your website to be slightly different, because as the website might include postage, for example, web also, you'd be cutting out the retailer markup. So would a customer recognize this? I suppose from my point of view, Orla, if you are selling on the website and you're wholesaling to a retailer somewhere else, then it will be noticed, and it's probably, you should keep the prices the same. But maybe Tracy, probably, do you wholesale and retail?
I do wholesale and retail, and I have exactly the same answer as Bernie. I mean, at the end of the day, retailers are charging an amount that covers their expenses as well. They've got huge markup, not markup, sorry, they've got huge overheads in terms of rent and electricity costs, staff costs. So there's a lot of people feel that sometimes the retail markup is too high. In fact, it's not. It's imperative to their survival. And if you put a price, in my opinion, I'm speaking for myself, but if you put a price in that undercuts the retailer, it's not really showing good faith. And there's a lot of trust involved in a business partnership, in particular right now, where you need to work together on trying to increase sales for each other. So view it as a partnership rather than two separate things. But what I would say to you is that the margin on retail is obviously lower than if you're getting something direct. So what you really want is, you want a nice blend of both, if you can. So yeah.
I would also say, Orla, on that, you asked about postage. So yes, you may incur different expenses as somebody selling online. It should be, when if it's very clear and documented, very clear that you're adding on a postage price onto it, that's one thing. The fact that you're retailing, whether you decide to swallow that is up to you.
Yeah.
So it really would probably end up being more expensive online if you charged them the postage. So work that out. It shouldn't really be any cheaper than if you were to go and get it in a store somewhere, is the bottom line. We've a couple. Emer, were you trying to get in there? No? I thought I heard somebody. No, you're okay. There's also, actually, Donal, could you just clarify what the legal threshold is at the moment?
For selling product, it's 75,000 euros, and if you're selling services, it's 37,500.
Okay.
Thanks. And we also have a comment here. Rachel was saying it's hard to balance everything. Tracy, how do you find work life?
Oh, I've aged dramatically. Like, I can't even lie. Like, it's just, there's so much. And that's why I try to say at the very beginning, you know, you're not just a maker, designer. And a lot of people dismiss you as, oh, she's a crafter, but my God, or he's a crafter. Like, you've got so many different strings or strings to your bow, like, and it's really difficult. So, yeah, I find social media, in fact, is probably the hardest thing that I find. I like to hide, despite me being on this webinar today. But when I'm creating, I really don't want to be in the face of everybody else. And I was being encouraged to do, you know, FaceTime videos and Facebook Live, and it's all part of what we should be offering. But at the end of the day, you need to be productive. And if you're doing things or doing too much, that essentially ends up with a loss of mojo, which is common among craftspeople, or you're just literally emotionally wrecked or exhausted, it's time to kind of make some changes. And okay, you may not have the social media account that you dreamed of, but at the same time, you're sane and you're still in business. So you just need to figure out what's right for you. I also think that you need to really look and take time to step back and look at what you're doing. That's why I wanted to talk today about the, you know, asking how you make, why you make, and the process. Is that you need to really look back and value all the elements of the business and what makes that business, I suppose, enjoyable for you and worthwhile for you, because you won't keep going at something that's so intense if you're not enjoying massive percentage of what you do. And then I'd say Donal would probably agree, go get some help if you need it in certain aspects.
Sure,
Yeah.
So I don't think there is.
There's a nice comment there, Bernie, in from Dan, and my apologies everyone, I'm getting a terrible echo. But Dan and others are saying, you know, that they love what they're doing, and it's the rest that can be taxing.
Yeah.
So I assume we just become more efficient at the rest, or try and subcontract the rest, or get as many people to support you as you can. And everyone's found it a very, very interesting webinar indeed. And of course you can have copies of the PowerPoints. And I would actually suggest today, because it was quite intricate, that people would go, I'll have it up probably in the next 24 hours, if you would go on and have a look. And Dan, that's very, very flattering that you have thanked the DCCI for the series, the excellent series of webinars. And he's saying that he only sells direct, never wholesale, and charge a premium price. Never discount. Small is beautiful. And I would totally agree with him. It was very reassuring, Tracy, that you said that you were going to blast that 75,000 ceiling. And it would be great if makers were aiming towards that, because as Donal says, accountants are to a penny. Well, he didn't quite say that, but accountants have a set value in the market, and that what you all make is very, very valuable and unique. And we do, I mean, we do have a very useful place for you, Donald. I'm sure you're going to be bombarded down the line with questions. People are saying it's all very helpful. Thank you very much. And it's given them great hints and tips. And I just want everyone to know that our panel is available if there are further one-on-one pieces that are needed. And I've got one last question in, Donald, if you'd like to answer it. Is the 75,000 wages or sales? That's go.
Sales, I'm afraid.
Sales.
Yeah.
Well, if they keep going, it could be 75,000 gross in wages as well, maybe. So with that, I'd like to thank you all very much, Bernie and Donald and Tracy, and our audience today of over 50 people. So I'm delighted that the value of pricing is coming home to everyone. And if you join us next week, it'll be marketing. So with that, thank you very much, everyone. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.